So let's grab this photo and my pencil. So I just want to mention something about the drawing first, okay? Now there's a lot of abstract in my sketch, because there's a lot of abstract in the boats and the shapes themselves. I want to draw your attention to something that's really important. Do you see the gaps? If you've got your own photo in front of you, do you see the gaps between the shapes? I'm talking about the nearest edge to each of these shapes. The nearest edge is probably this little white buoy here, okay? And this little whatever it is here, this piece on the middle boat. There's a gap there, if you'll see it. There's a gap similarly here between the buoy of this little vessel and the fenders of this vessel here. Now, if you look at my image, my sketch, I quite deliberately did away with those gaps. This means that if you run a contour drawing like this, all right, leaving your pencil on the paper, they actually connect. There's no gap. I won't go up here. I'll just go through the boat for the moment. And then I pencil around here, and look what happens. Once again, my shapes touch, okay? So it brings that connectivity. Trust me, if you, and it's something you should always be considering, no matter what you're drawing and painting. Connectivity is so important. If you had a number of figures in a street, okay, you might first of all draw them out like this. A couple of people here together, two people arm in arm, single person here, single person here, single person there. Now, those are sort of four individual shapes. You need to find ways of connecting your shapes. And often with figures in streets, if you look at a lot of the reputable art that's out there, when people are painting figures, they'll connect their figures by the use of shadows across the floor. It'll join them at the feet, okay? They may have something behind. It might, just for argument's sake, it might be a shop window. That effectively joins those two figures there. There may be a railing on the wall behind them. That effectively joins your shapes, joins your figures. Don't think figures, don't think boats, shapes. Join your shapes wherever the opportunity arises, because there's nothing worse than having, you know, a house over here, something like this, a figure over here, a tree over here, something like, or two, you know, tree, something like that, and there's no continuity. It's the continuity stops there and it stops there. You find ways of connecting your figures. A row of trees or a hedgerow connects to this figure. That shadow off the figure here connects to the shadow of the tree. You connect, you thread, you sort of weave your shapes together. So I hope that that's a good tip that you need to try and remember as much as you can. Now, if I were doing if this was a drawing lesson, okay, I would probably start you all off by doing something like this. I would say, get you to practice that thing about not taking your pencil off the paper. Okay, leaving your pencil on the paper. And I'm going to start, I'm going to do it as an example for you here. I'm going to start my pencil mark on the front end of the top of this boat here, okay, just there, which would be about here, somewhere like that. Now I'll leave my pencil on the paper. I'll take this shape. It goes something like this. There's a buoy here. It touches the neighboring boat, something like that. Don't worry about how rough or crude this looks when you're doing it. Down to the front end of this little boat here. It's something, it's worth practicing this whenever you get the opportunity doing this sort of thing. Now, this left-hand side of my boat, if you want to know where I am, I'm about here. Okay, I'm about there. That goes up to that buoy. Remember, I said I'd make contact with the neighboring boat on the left-hand side. Now I'm going to run out. I haven't got enough information here. I'm going to run out of information about here if I do this. But I just wanted to give you an example of how drawing like this can really train your brain to see the foreshortened shape. You start seeing it for its shape rather than the brain telling you that it's doing something more simplistic. Let's say that there's the edge of my paper, something like that. I would pick up my shape. I mean, you could start back over here, of course, and work backwards. You could say that shape goes up here. There's the canopy of the boat, or the cabin of the boat. It goes along something like that. Then it goes across there, back end of the boat. I'll probably be miles out here to start off with. And then it comes down here, remember, to the buoy. It makes contact with that boat there. And then that goes back there, something like that. That comes back down here, comes over to here, comes up to here, goes up the side of the back of the left-hand boat and does something like that. Okay, so I'll zoom in just so you can see this, because I'm looking on my screen. It's pretty faint. I'm just going to zoom in and show you. I'm not asking you to do this today, folks. I just wanted to show you an exercise that's really useful for training the eye to see a shape for what it really is. The shape that really is in front of you, rather than the shape that the brain wants to interpret to make things easier. Now, I'm going to show you another way. Let's zoom back out a second. Whoops, go that way, and then put something there for my camera to focus on. Now I'm going to show you another way. Right. And that is simply to see, to put, there are basically only three shapes in this world. They vary, of course. Each of these three shapes has variants. We deal with boxes or rectangles. They're the same, they're boxes. We deal with circles or ovoids or ovals. We deal with triangles. Okay, so nearly everything we look at will fit into one of those three categories. If we take the central boat, okay, the first thing I would do, I would say that there's a square end to the front end of this shape, like a rectangular box. Okay, it looks something like that. It goes back with a bit of perspective to a flat end of the back of the box down there. Side wall comes this way. So I'm looking to fit this shape into a box, but the box has its perspective that goes back something like that. Okay, there'd be a wall down there and then a side wall like that. That's, roughly speaking, the shape that my little boat resides within. Okay, so then what you have to do is say, well, it's a boat, it's not a box. It's curved at the back there. It curved those corners off. It comes down to a central measurement. If you look at that box face there, a central measurement of about there, slightly to the right, remember, because it's foreshortened, it's shifted, the axis is to the right. And then it turns back to something like that. I mean, you can liken shapes to other things. There's a popular technique with boats in particular that people think of them as shoes or slippers. And if you have a nice short, the appropriate sort of footwear, like a slipper, you should put it on a table in front of you and draw it. Just draw its outline, its contour. And you'll see why it's referred to why boats are referred to sometimes as resembling these objects. So it looks something like that. And then, of course, from here we look at our photograph for the actual shape of this vessel, and it does something like that. There's a nice point to it about here, something like that. And then it's just a case of erasing the unwanted lines. Okay. So there we are. There's how I get my boat. So in time, you might not even have to do the box before, these shapes. You will just end up seeing things the way they should be portrayed. Just make my few you know, corrections and fine-tuning adjustments here. There's a buoy over here, remember, and there's a rail here. Now that tells us then that the buoy that we want to connect to this shape is about there somewhere. Now it connects to this shape on this boat. This buoy here will connect to the shape. Scale wise, if we have to crop our painting, then we can do so. We can simply crop it in by the time the painting is finished. Don't worry about that now. Just get this. I mean, I'm using 15 by 11 paper. If you want some idea of my measurement here, I'd say that that measurement there is about 4 inches, and the measurement from the back to the front there is about another 4.5 inches. It almost sits in a square. You know, you could even look at it that way. But that shape now sits in a square of about 4 inches by 4 inches. So right, onto this boat here, and what I'm doing now, I'm using another technique again. I've got my middle boat in by using that technique of a box shape at an angle. I'm looking at the negative spaces here, that one there between the two boats. That gives me a good idea as to the position of this neighboring boat. So, and then it does something like this. So let's use a sort of box again. This box is further to the right, so the front end of the box will be slightly more to the right over here, with the middle of that measurement being about there. Hope that, sorry, I'm not paying attention to my photo. Sorry, middle of that box is the front end of the boat. Sorry, about there. Okay, but there's still a box shape there. Something like that. Okay, and then it comes down here, something like this, and it does something like that. Now I can make other adjustments. I think it's too high in this corner, so it needs to be lower there at about that point. And then there's a cabin that barely affects really the shape. It does something like that, doesn't it? So, and the front end does something like this. There are windows, and I'm doing an approximation. No, I'm putting them in approximately where I think they are. The 3 front windows which go back in that. Everything is a box, even the cabin, you see. So they've got a box end like this, has a side to the box there with those windows on it. And if you put that box wall shape in, as I'm doing here, then it's much easier to place your windows like that. I'll make any other adjustments. If I feel as though that's still, you know, a bit out, then we can make further adjustments. Let's get rid of my scribbling. So this is one video, folks. When you get it, you might want to replay a few times. So I'm checking now. I'm looking at this measurement here. Mine's a bit deep, isn't it? So that means I think the water level is correct between the two. Imagine the water flat like this between the two vessels. Okay, I think that's about right. So that means if this is too deep, that's not the wrong one. That line there is the correct one. So that means this one has to be made slightly shallower. That measurement there now is a bit shallower. So okay, the front end about here, somewhere like that. I mean, you could pick, you know, this is quite a quick sketch, really. You could pick holes in this drawing, and you know, and you'd be right to do so, perhaps. But I'm hoping that this is giving you the basic sort of feel for how we get complicated shapes when they're foreshortened. Right, so even quicker on this one now. I got to make up the left-hand boat, really, haven't I? Because we can't see it all. So let's say that it's in, whereas this one goes to the right slightly, okay, the center of this front of the boat. That one goes to the right even more acutely. This one goes to the left. Okay, making a nice sort of, you've got this sense of a dynamic like this running right through your painting. There would be a vanishing point way off up here somewhere. So even we think of buildings and streets and railway lines having perspective lines like this, but you can apply them to, I think, everything on this planet, really. So let's say there's a box end about here. The water's flat between these things about here, like that. So I'm going to say that the front end of my boat is about there. You can see the foreshortened side of that front end compared to this quadrant, this half here, okay? Much wider here because this is the side that we can see more of. Now that's supposed to go back so I can make contact with my buoy here. Now, if you couldn't make contact between this buoy and that buoy, the fender and on this boat and the buoy on that boat, there are other ways of linking. You could have mooring ropes that go from one boat, seemingly go from one boat to the other. What it is, they just cross each other's paths a bit, that's all. But that too would work. All these things are great ways of bringing continuity to your painters. Now, I'm talking and drawing at the same time. Looking at the bottom of this boat, I don't think it's like it's saying it's not on the same surface. I think I'm just going to shallow that off a little bit so that it's closer to this line here. They don't have to be exact. One could be more forward than the others, but if you overdo it, I think sometimes it can look a bit awkward. So I'm going to get the point of where the front of this boat touches the water a little bit closer to the horizontal line of these two. I think that will look better. Intuition, for all the theory that we apply and have to, well, we don't have to learn all the theory if the truth be known. Need to learn some, but good old intuition is essential. So if it looks incorrect, then do something about it. It just felt as though it didn't look like it was on the same plane of water as these other two boats. That might be a bit high up here, so we'll flatten that. Now that's quite a lot of information for a painting, for a drawing for a painting. So please feel free to omit certain parts of this demonstration, unless if you're feeling really brave, please have a crack at it. I mean, that's really what I would do in the past. I know that I would probably make an ugly painting, due to me not having perhaps practiced enough of my drawing skills, but I would still have a crack at it. But all I'm saying is you don't have to you don't have to push it to that degree, folks. Do what you feel most comfortable with. Right, okay, there's a canopy here. Just looking up at my photo and getting an idea. This will be quite abstract. This. And there's a canopy over this one, which is amazing. Quite a... You don't get vessels like this in the UK. This was in Menorca in Spain, this photo was taken. Seems to have that sort of shape up here, something like that. I'm connecting those shapes, look at the top as well, the canopies. Not so much on this one, because we've got the connection down here through the buoys. And So now then, I am going to, as promised, I'm going to paint this like I did. There we are, folks. I'm coming over to you now to see how you've been getting on, and we can discuss things a bit further. Right. So there's a box, and in this box, I'm going to put all three boats. This way, all your boats will have a unified effect. You'll get will look like they're all on the same bit of water. Okay, so you'd sort of, I mean, this is you've got to be careful not to make it look too what's the word, mechanical, if you like. There would be your right hand boat. Okay, bear in mind it would share the same line as the other two boats. Your middle boat would come through here, something like this. There would be front end of that boat, and this box over here would be your left hand boat. Now, if I take just this one on the right for the moment, okay, we know that there's a central line through these objects. You can imagine it running through from back to front like that. Okay, there'd be a central line running through this one. I've just got it off center still a little bit there. Come through something like that, and the central line coming through from the back to the front of this left-hand boat. What you've got to bear in mind and make allowances for is this. I've divided this front end of this box into two halves, haven't I? Okay. Now, that right-hand scale box size, okay, will be slightly smaller than this one because this is the nearer one. Okay. And then in there you can put the front end of your boat. Something like that. Okay, and you know what's coming next. This one comes up here, something like that. Front end of this boat, excuse me, and then that boat over here does that. And you can see again the usefulness, that reliable discipline, call it what you want, in terms of using boxes and shapes. So can you see that? I hope you can see that clearly.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I hope that explains it well, because that will make sure that all your three boats look like they're all sat on the same bit of water. Now, let's turn to real life for a moment. In the real life situation, there are very few waters other than in landlocked harbors and things like this, and lakes, where there isn't a little bit of pitch and yaw on the vessels. But that's okay. You can sometimes that you know, if you want to convey that, all you have to do is tilt one of these boats slightly. But I'd stay out of that. I would. There's no need. It doesn't enhance a painting that much if you're trying to suggest there's a little bit of pitch and yaw on a couple of moored vessels close to hand. I wouldn't worry about that. But in the real world, there might be a little bit of that. If you're out at rough sea, you know, big wild sea, or out in the middle of the ocean, then you need to look at the mast of a boat might be sat across the angle like that, the box end of the ship. But for this, if you really want to tie them all in, they're all sat together, all very nicely. That's sort of why I entitled it The Three Amigos. There's sort of three little characters, three little friends sat on the same bit of water there. But that's the way to do it, Linda.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it helps if your boxes are correct as well, doesn't it?